Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, accounting for the money supply. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. If you remember back to this summer, there was a lot of discussion on where Bitcoin was headed. And there were a lot of confident calls by a lot of Bitcoin bears saying that Bitcoin was going to go back down to $10,000 or below, and that this was a market cycle peak at just below a very modest $65,000. There were also a lot of people saying that it needed to go to 20K or 25K, 18K, 15K, 14K. We saw all sorts of predictions. But the interesting thing that we identified back then, and I'll just play it, I'll play a clip for you, okay? And we're going to talk about this and then talk about what it means with respect to where we are today. And I think you guys will find it very interesting. All right, so I'm going to play you a clip from the summer.
And when you account for it and you just simply draw a line across, you can see that in fact,
we're accounting for the money supply. Okay, this is just Bitcoin divided by M2.
The prior all-time high in 2017 was at this point. We actually came up to this, or came down to this point back in June 22nd or so, and then we're testing it again today about a month later. So what I find interesting is, yes, there's a lot of discussion as to whether Bitcoin will ever go to 20K again. Obviously, there's a case for the bulls and a case for the bears to be made, but when you account for the money supply, we're already testing it, right? We're already testing it. Now,
so that's what I wanted to show, right? Back in July, you can see we put out this video on July 20th, okay? And I don't, July 20th, I believe was, that was basically the bottom, right? July 20th, yeah, July 20th was the bottom, okay? And at the bottom, we were identifying the fact that when accounting for M2, the money supply, we'd already tested the prior all-time high. We'd already tested it, okay? So it gave some evidence to suggest that we don't necessarily have to go test it, without accounting for the money supply. And why do we talk about the money supply? Well, one of the reasons to talk about it is if you go look at what the money supply has done, historically speaking, it was fairly predictable. But starting in March of 2020 is when it really started to take another course. Okay, it really started to go off on its own course here, completely different than what we had seen in the past. And therefore, it made sense to say, well, if we're just going to flood the market with tons of dollars and everyone's getting, we're having a USD airdrop into $300 million or into 300 million people's wallets, if we're just having another altcoin airdrop, right? Then could it not affect the markets, or could it not affect the markets? And when you look at this chart against for Bitcoin, when you don't account for the money supply, of course, when you don't account for it, we did not test the prior all-time high. But when you account for the money supply, okay, when you account for it, as I showed back then, and it actually ended up being the bottom, right? That ended up being the bottom. When you account for it, it is the prior all-time high of 2017, right? The bottom in July, and we also went there in June as well, and came really close to it in May. That was the prior all-time high from the prior market cycle. Okay, so we said, look, we already tested it. We don't necessarily need to go back down there against the US dollar, because we also have to understand that there's just a lot more people have all this money that they would have not otherwise had if the economy had just carried on how it normally would, or if the money supply had carried on just as it normally would. But because everything changed, as you guys know, back in March of 2020, we should take it into consideration. Now, why is that important today? Why am I bringing that up today? Well, the reason is because I've seen a lot of people say, look, why is Bitcoin behaving like this? Bitcoin is hanging out at 61K, but what's going on? Normally when it puts in a new all-time high, it goes crazy, right? And then the rest is history. Why in the world is Bitcoin not going parabolic yet? Well, first of all, before we get to the money supply, I would like to draw your attention, okay? I would like to draw your attention to Exhibit A, okay? Exhibit A. In 2013, we put in an all-time high at just below $1,300. And then in 2017, we were in fact able to put in a new all-time high that went above the prior one by about 5% or so. And even though we went above it by 5%, it still took us from mid-March until late April to actually have a parabolic rally start. Okay, and then that parabolic rally started in April 2017 and then finished up in December 2017. But that parabolic rally did not happen the first time Bitcoin put in a new all-time high. It first got rejected first after seeing a new all-time high, and then it took it another 6 weeks or so before it continued to rally. So first of all, we should say that even when you don't account for the money supply, there has been a time where we went above the prior all-time high, we got rejected, just above it, and then we still ended up going above it just about 6 weeks later. All right, so first of all, let's consider that. The second thing I would like to consider is where is the valuation of Bitcoin with respect to the money supply in reference to the prior all-time high? Well, if you take a line and draw it at the prior all-time high and extend it across, well, look at that. If you account for the money supply, this is a statement. Okay, I'm making a statement. If you account for the money supply, M2, Bitcoin has not yet put in a new all-time high. That could perhaps help explain why so many people are wondering, like, why is Bitcoin just hanging out at 61, 62, 60, 59K? Like, why is it not going crazy? Well, first of all, there's an example in the past where we've already seen that before, so there's evidence to suggest that that's possible because we've seen it before, even without accounting for the money supply. But if you account for the money supply, you can see that we actually have not put in a new all-time high yet. Now, I'm not trying to take away anything from Bitcoin. As I said before, 64.8K is not the market cycle peak, and now we've proven that it was not the market cycle peak because Bitcoin went to about $67,000. I will sit here and say again, I don't think 67K is the peak. I do ultimately think, even when accounting for the money supply, Bitcoin should be able to break above. I'm just trying to provide some evidence as to maybe why it hasn't actually gone parabolic yet, or we're not just constantly in price discovery mode yet. It could simply be because we have not put in a new all-time high when accounting for the money supply. Now, I still would argue that Bitcoin is in a technical uptrend, and we probably will be putting in a new all-time high sooner rather than later. We could put it, we could continue rallying. Maybe even by November, we'll continue the rally. If it doesn't happen by then, could it take a little bit longer? Sure, but even then, I don't think we're that many months away from putting a new all-time high. So consider it. I think it's a useful point to consider. Not to take anything away from Bitcoin, because I am still very much bullish on Bitcoin, and I do think it will continue to push higher than 67K. But perhaps this would provide at least a little bit of evidence to suggest, well, why is Bitcoin kind of just hanging out at 61K? Normally when you see these moves above the prior all-time high, we do tend to go parabolic, but there was one example where we didn't. We consolidated for 6 more weeks before going parabolic. And if we didn't have that example, then maybe you could look at this and say, well, technically speaking, there has not been a new all-time high when accounting for the money supply. Additionally, I would like to draw your attention to one caveat. The money supply, some of the stuff for M2 did get discontinued, I know. If you look at this chart, there is at least data through September. You might say, well, shouldn't it have data through October? Yeah, but you should still consider the fact that even as measured from, say, like August going to September, it only changes it by about 1% or so, okay? So even if we had the money supply on here for October, which again, you can see this is updated about once a month, even if we had it for October, it would only change the valuation by approximately 1%. So I think we would more or less come to the same conclusions, even if the valuation were off by 1%. But I wanted to draw your attention to this fact that when accounting for the money supply, Bitcoin has not yet put in a new all-time high. I do think it will. What do we need? We need time. Time is on our side. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Remember to check out the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com if you want to know how I am navigating these markets. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe, click the bell icon to turn on notifications, and I will see you next time. Bye.